What bad news for Boeing and NASA. But this time, it's not about the never-ending Starliner saga. It's about a rocket considered the foundation of the well-known moon program Artemis. That's the SLS. So, what happened here? All will be revealed in today's episode of Alpha Tech. And before getting into the main content, we want to tell you, first, thank you so much for watching our videos these last 3 years. Right now, we got 86,000 subscribers, getting very close to 100,000. To hit this goal, though, we need your help. So please, if you're watching right now, hit that subscribe button, and that way you will never miss out on our exciting videos that often get updated up to 2 times daily. Thank you so much for watching, and let's go ahead and get into today's show. All right, so the Space Launch System, SLS, that's NASA's next-generation heavy-lift rocket designed to be the backbone of Artemis, which aims to bring humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. The most powerful rocket ever built, SLS is intended to carry astronauts, cargo, and other essential components to deep space, including the Lunar Gateway station and landers for the moon's surface. SLS plays a critical role in this mission, as it's designed to deliver the Orion spacecraft, which will carry astronauts to lunar orbit. The rocket's versatility allows it to support different mission profiles, from crewed lunar landings to deep space exploration missions. However, the SLS project has been plagued by significant delays and budget overruns. Originally scheduled for its maiden launch in the early 2010s, the project has faced technical challenges, design changes, and management issues, pushing its first flight to 2022. Even with this delay, the project continues to struggle with meeting its milestones, leading to further postponements for subsequent Artemis missions. The budget for the SLS has also spiraled out of control, with initial estimates of around $10 billion for development now exceeding $20 billion. These cost overruns have raised concerns about the sustainability of the program and its ability to meet NASA's long-term goals for human space exploration. However, before getting into the issue of these excessive costs, let's talk about the aspects that can be considered core factors leading to unacceptable consequences of this rocket that was once regarded as the key to the stars. A recent report from NASA's Office of the Inspector General (OIG) has uncovered alarming new problems with Boeing's handling of the SLS rocket, which is central to the Artemis program. One of the most significant issues identified is the employment of an underqualified and undertrained workforce. Boeing's been relying on technicians and workers who lack sufficient expertise in aerospace production, particularly in the assembly of critical components like the SLS rocket booster and the new exploration upper stage. This shortage of skilled labor has directly contributed to quality concerns and operational inefficiencies within the program. A typical example is a troubleshooting finding involving critical hardware concerns related to the welding operations. During the site visit in April 2023, inspectors discovered that welds on a liquid oxygen tank intended for use in the Artemis II mission did not meet the required specifications. This flaw was serious enough that the tank had to be segregated and was likely marked for disposal. NASA officials told OIG that the welding issues arose due to Boeing's inexperienced technicians and inadequate work order planning and supervision. The aforementioned welding issues have already resulted in a significant 7-month delay, showing the serious impact this bug could have on the entire Artemis program. The report also highlights significant deficiencies in Boeing's quality management systems. NASA used the Defense Contract Management Agency, DCMA, to monitor Boeing's work on the SLS core in the upper stages of Michoud. According to DCMA officials, Boeing's process for addressing contractual noncompliance has been ineffective, and the company's generally been non-responsive in taking corrective actions when the same quality control issues reoccur, the OIG report states. The report found that there were 71 corrective action requests, or CARs, issued by DCMA from September 21 to 23 regarding Boeing's SLS work. A CAR identifies a specific contract nonconformity about the work. Of the 71, 24 were Level 2 CARs. That's a more serious version used for issues that can't be corrected immediately or involve critical safety hardware. That number of CARs, the DCMA said, is unusually high for a spaceflight program at this stage in development. There were enough CARs of one kind, inspections of work called stamp warranty, that NASA recommended DCMA draft a Level 3 CAR reserved for severe nonconformities. That CAR was never issued, as NASA elected to use what the report called alternative corrective action methods, which included additional reviews. The new report also predicts that the development costs for Block 1B will hit $5.7 billion before its official launch. That's $700 million higher than the cost estimate NASA officially announced last December. Originally slated for completion and deployment years ago, Block 1B version is now a staggering 7 years behind schedule. The financial implications are equally severe. Initial estimates of the cost of Block 1B's configuration was at $962 million in 2017. However, due to numerous setbacks and ongoing issues, that cost has now ballooned to an estimate of $2.8 billion. This massive increase in budget reflects the complex challenges faced during the development and manufacturing process. A key factor contributing to these cost overruns is Boeing's use of a cost-plus contract structure. Under this arrangement, Boeing's reimbursed for all incurred expenses plus an additional fee, regardless of the total cost of the project. While this structure provides a safety net for the contractor, it also creates potential disincentives for efficiency. With a guarantee of reimbursement for all costs, there's less financial pressure on Boeing to streamline operations or adhere strictly to budget constraints. As a result, the cost-plus contract may inadvertently encourage prolonged development timelines, as there is less immediate financial motivation to complete the project swiftly or to cut costs. Moreover, the report also criticizes the management of the main part of the Block 1B SLS. The exploration upper stage EUS will replace the interim cryogenic propulsion stage used on the initial Block 1 SLS. The EUS accounts for more than half the development costs for Block 1B, as mentioned above. While NASA projects spending on the EUS to go down as Boeing moves workers off the project, we project Block 1B annual costs will remain at 2023 levels through at least 2026 before tapering off in the out years, the report concluded, noting NASA's budget projections don't include the additional funding needed for EUS through 2027. That risks delays in the Artemis IV launch planned for late 2028. Meanwhile, Boeing, using a software tool called an Earned Value Management System, measures progress based on technical, cost, and other data that has been disapproved for use by the Department of Defense since 2020 because of several deficiencies. According to NASA contracting officials, Boeing cannot produce a realistic baseline delivery date for the EUS due to continuing deficiencies in its EVMS, the OIG report noted. Given Boeing's quality management and its related workforce challenges, we are concerned these factors could potentially impact the safety of SLS and the Orion spacecraft, including its crew and cargo, the report concluded. It made 4 recommendations, including an improved quality management program, cost overrun analysis, and coordination with DCMA on bringing EVMS into compliance, that NASA accepted in its response. The agency, though, rejected a 4th recommendation, which called for financial penalties for Boeing's non-compliance with quality controls. NASA interprets this recommendation to be directing NASA to institute penalties outside the bounds of the contract, wrote Kathy Corner, NASA Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, in the agency's response to the report. She argues that there are other mechanisms, like provisions for issuing award fees in the contract, that can be used to address the quality problems. Instituting financial penalties outside the bounds of the contract subverts the control process of the contract, she concluded. Our recommendation was written to allow the agency latitude to use the most appropriate mechanisms practicable to impose financial penalties on Boeing for not complying with required quality control standards. Supervisors responded in the report, deeming the recommendation unresolved pending further discussions with the agency. Honestly, it seems like NASA is determined to protect its favorite contractor, Boeing, no matter the cost. Historically, NASA's often been lenient in overseeing this struggling supplier. Back in 2019, NASA instructed Boeing to complete the core stage for Artemis III by 2024, but so far, they've only managed to finish the one for Artemis II. The core stage, a newly developed component of the SLS, started production in 2014 under cost-plus contracts worth billions. These contracts ensure that the contractors reimburse for all allowable costs plus a fee, typically around 10% due to the inevitable technical challenges. However, this type of contract has a downside. It doesn't incentivize rapid program completion, especially when companies aim to maximize profits. The longer the contract drags on, the higher the costs and fees incurred. For this reason, it's understandable if contractors deliberately extend their production timelines. Since 2014, Boeing has encountered multiple issues during SLS production, leading to significant schedule delays. Contaminated fuel lines before delivery by the supplier required reinspection of all engine parts, causing several months of delays. The Vertical Assembly Center, VAC, a critical tool for assembling the core stage fuel tanks, was initially installed incorrectly, preventing it from lifting components into position. After discovering this error in September 2014, The VAC had to get completely rebuilt, and subsequent welding problems throughout 2016 further compounded delays. Another setback occurred in February 2017 when the tornado struck the Michoud assembly facility, damaging buildings and slowing down core stage production. Even the testing phase, which began in early 2020, faced long-term delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic and technical issues with both hardware and infrastructure. As a result, we had to wait until November 16 to witness the first flight of the SLS on the Artemis I mission, where it successfully performed. Despite these delays, NASA continues to work with Boeing. In 2019, NASA even announced ongoing contract negotiations with Boeing to purchase up to 10 additional SLS core stages, including for the mission that aims to land the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. The news did not disclose the cost. NASA and Boeing have been less than transparent about this, but it's certain that the production and operational expenses for a single SLS launch exceed $4 billion. In November 2018, NASA's Inspector General reported that Boeing's core stage contract accounted for 40% of the $11.9 billion, or $4.76 billion, spent on the SLS as of August 2018. Another 2021 report from the NASA Office of Inspector General projected that NASA would spend a total of $93 billion on Artemis from 2012 to 2025, with each SLS launch costing a little more than $4 billion. A significant portion of this budget also goes to contractors across every U.S. state and more than 20 similar partners throughout Europe. There is no doubt that NASA's Space Launch System is an impressive sight, having completed its first Artemis mission at the end of 2022. Unfortunately, it's been the only launch system in over a decade of rocket development so far. Combined with technical issues and severe cost overruns, it's not an exaggeration to say that the SLS program has been quite the mistake for NASA. Despite this, officials remain determined to continue the program at all costs. So, what risks could this pose for the future of the U.S. space industry? If there were an alternative, who should NASA choose? Artemis II, officially scheduled for September next year, will be the first human journey to the vicinity of the moon since the last Apollo lunar landing mission in 1972. To prepare for this crucial mission, the most expensive and important core stage of the SLS rocket recently arrived at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, July 26th. The core is the backbone of SLS, and it's the backbone of the Artemis mission, said Matt Ramsey, NASA's mission manager for Artemis II. We've been waiting for the core to get here because all the integrated tests and checkouts that we have to do have the core stage. It has the flight avionics that drive the whole system. The boosters are also important, but the core is really the backbone for Artemis. So it's a big day. After that, the core stages will likely begin stacking with the rocket's two powerful solid rocket boosters on NASA's Mobile Launch Platform in September. Each booster, supplied by Northrop Grumman, consists of 5 segments with pre-packed solid fuel and a nose cone. All components of the SLS rocket boosters are at Kennedy and ready for stacking. The SLS upper stage, built by ULA, is also at the Florida launch site. If NASA can accomplish all this by the September deadline, the timeline for the lunar flyby mission in 2025 will seem reasonable. However, we cannot be certain of anything, as SLS has always been fraught with issues. Moreover, Boeing, the contractor responsible for producing the rocket's most crucial core stage, has recently caused several technical disasters in its various fields, including problems with aircraft engineering and, most notably, issues with the Starliner spacecraft. Currently, Starliner is still stuck on the ISS without a return date, and that raises concerns about the safety and reliability of the new rocket stage that just got delivered to the Space Center. While Starliner and the astronauts do have a rescue option available, being an LEO with SpaceX's Dragon capsule as a backup, the SLS and astronauts up there in space would have no such option for rescue at that time. SLS's rocket's core stage will accompany the spacecraft for most of the initial journey. Its impact should not be underestimated. If problems arise during the operation, the spacecraft deployment could fail. This situation could resemble the Astrobotic mission earlier this year when launch issues led to the failure of the Peregrine lunar lander. And this is not our only concern. SLS is always the topic of debate. Many wonder whether it should be scrapped just due to its exorbitant costs. SLS is a very large vehicle. The initial version, reusing engines from the Space Shuttle program, will be capable of carrying 95 tons to LEO and 26 to the Moon. A planned upgrade Block 2 variant will carry up to 130 tons to low Earth orbit. Big rockets are great, yeah, but the SLS program has never been really tied to any space exploration goals. At the time Congress funded SLS, there was no lunar mission to design for. Artemis program didn't come around until 2017. SLS, a rocket to nowhere. Eventually, though, the Space Launch System SLS rocket was completed to serve Artemis. Despite a successful test flight at the end of 2022, the project's been delayed. Initially slated for launch in 2017, SLS had extended delays and soaring costs. In total, the program has cost, get this, $23.8 billion, illustrating severe budget overruns in space exploration. To date, as the space market has shifted towards a new trend in the industry, lowering costs to make space technology accessible to more investors, NASA's space program has not been able to reduce prices. In fact, it remains extremely expensive. After the conclusion of the Artemis I mission, NASA proposed a solution to reduce LS launch costs by half by shifting to a service contract model. That report estimated the Block 1B version of SLS, which will be used starting with Artemis IV, will initially cost $2.5 billion per flight. A 50% cost reduction, according to Epoch, would mean SLS costs dropping to $1.25 billion per flight. The contract would be designed with Deep Space Transport, a joint venture between Boeing and Northrop Grumman, the two primary contractors for the rocket's components. However, NASA's Office of the Inspector General concluded that neither the cost reduction nor additional customers for SLS are likely to happen. This skepticism comes from reviews of lots more efforts to cut costs that have yet to achieve the expected savings, such as assembling the core stages for SLS and restarting RS-25 engine production. The report further noted that the lack of competition makes it difficult for NASA to negotiate cost reductions, in contrast to the competition seen in other launch services and commercial crew programs. OIG concluded that based on its review of existing contracts and affordability initiatives, the cost of SLS will stay over $2 billion a vehicle for the first 10 launches under the Epoch contract. But who wants to spend over $1 billion to launch anything on NASA's big rocket other than the agency itself? No one. The Space Force has outright refused to cooperate with NASA on the SLS system. The problem with the Space Launch System lies in its origins because President Barack Obama's cancellation of the Constellation program angered Congress on both sides of the aisle. NASA was obligated to enter into a Faustian bargain. NASA agreed to build a heavy lift rocket in exchange for the Commercial Crew program. Thus was born the Space Launch System, whose purpose was as much to provide jobs to constituents and, in fact, contracts to campaign contributors as it was to launch stuff up into space. NASA signed a specific type of contract with Boeing and other major suppliers for SLS. It's called a cost-plus contract, which financially drags down NASA when projects face cost overruns while still giving contractors additional payments or bonuses. This type of contract has been heavily criticized and is considered a disaster. Meanwhile, fixed-price contracts are more popular with a set price cap, like contracts NASA provided to Boeing and SpaceX for its Commercial Crew program. So, will NASA have to continue operating despite the future costs of SLS? Frankly, that's on them. They could abandon the SLS immediately because there's now many alternatives available. In fact, the private space industry has made major advances. It's like a lifeline for NASA with its expensive, unfinished space programs. SpaceX currently captures about 85% of the commercial launch market with its partially reusable Falcon 9. On a recycled booster, the listed price of a Falcon 9 launch is just $67 million and could drop further as boosters are recycled more frequently, up to 40 or 50 times. Launching on the triple booster Falcon Heavy has a listed price of $90 million. When Blue Origin completes its partially reusable orbital rocket, New Glenn, next year, the competition is going to heat up. New Glenn will have a payload lift of up to 45 tons to LEO, bringing it closer to Falcon Heavy in payload capacity rather than Falcon 9, and with a much bigger payload volume. This is an exciting competition, but a game changer will happen with SpaceX's Starship, which is set to begin carrying commercial payloads next year. It'll be lifting over 150 tons to LEO on SpaceX's Super Heavy booster. Unlike Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, or New Glenn, Starship's going to be fully reusable. Both the Super Heavy booster and the second stage Starship vehicle itself can land and fly again. Unlike SLS, Starship will be capable of on-orbit refueling, meaning it does not have to reduce payload size to get to higher orbits. A fully loaded Starship carrying more than 150 tons could launch to LEO, connect with another Starship full of fuel, and refuel. With a full tank starting in LEO, the first Starship could then carry its payload anywhere in the solar system. On-orbit refueling gives Starship a major performance advantage. Even the strongest Block II version of SLS, which isn't expected to be done until the 2030s, can only carry 45 tons just to the moon. If Starship succeeds, it will be capable of lifting more than 3 times the payload of the strongest SLS version to the moon without costing taxpayers and development funds. Complete reusability gives Starship a huge economic advantage over SLS. While the marginal cost of an SLS launcher is at least $1 billion, maybe higher, SpaceX's Starship launch costs are going to be lower, potentially unbelievably low. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has said that he thinks there's a path to producing Starship and Super Heavy at a lower cost than Falcon 9. Using liquid methane as fuel instead of the usual RP-1 will help reduce fuel costs to just $900,000 a launch. Ultimately, reusability is the game changer in cutting costs. Overall, Musk hopes Starship's LEO launch cost will be less than 1/10 of Falcon 9 per kilogram. Overall, the private space industry is thriving. Thanks to reusability, on-orbit refueling, and the economies of scale supported by long-term settlements, the low-cost human presence on the moon and Mars is now within our grasp. That's why it's such a bummer that NASA's budget's getting used by contract to provide a handful of states with cushy jobs at traditional defense contractors under cost-plus contracts. NASA's human spaceflight programs are heading towards a ridiculous outcome. $2 billion is the cost per SLS launch, while new space companies like SpaceX offer similar capabilities at only 1/10 of the cost or less. This is a huge waste of taxpayer money. Ultimately, it means we'll get much less space development for the money spent. Instead of a gateway to the moon, we could have a city on the moon. SLS Block 1 has flown. Now there's SLS Block 1B, but it's economically obsolete. In a sensible world, Congress would shut down that entire program, and NASA's space exploration would be continuing on commercial rockets. Unfortunately, that's not the world we're living in. Fortunately, the private sector is moving forward without billions of NASA's dollars. In a few short years, humans will set foot on the moon again, and then they'll go to Mars. Humanity's soon going to have cities in space. And when the history of this era is written, the record will show that the colonization of space occurred despite the government's frivolous waste of money on a rocket that no one wanted to use. And that's all for today's episode. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.